can I get a roll call?
Commissioner Kurtz.
Here.
Commissioner Selmont.
Here.
Commissioner Strollo. Commissioner Natale. Commissioner Kudaris.
Here.
Commissioner Bowman.
Here.
Commissioner Downs.
Here.
Commissioner Affey.
Here.
Commissioner McKinney.
Here.
I have a quorum.
Alternate Commissioner Hilsinger.
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Neff. You have a quorum.
Okay. Everyone join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our only order of business tonight is the zoned petition for zone text amendment on behalf of Hydroclonics LLC, specialty growers. I don't have a call up here. Do you have a call?
You don't, it's a continued public hearing.
Continued
so-
public hearing,
Yeah.
no call? Okay. Representing the applicant tonight?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Bowman.
you've come to my attention, I'd like to ask the applicant a question.
Of course.
He might,
If I could just make sure I'm on the record real quick.
I'm sorry?
I just want to make sure I'm on the record real quick as who I am before you.
Okay,
So,
go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Ryan Hoyler, Robinson and Cole here for the applicant Hydroclonics. Thank you.
Okay. For the applicant, do you do any business with F.F. Hitchcock or Hitchcock Company in Cheshire? You or your companies or,
Brant Smith, Cheshire.
I'm sorry?
I'm identifying myself. Brant Smith, Cheshire, Connecticut.
Yeah.
I currently am not using FF Hitchcock for anything. I have in the past.
You
But
have in
current-
the past.
I have in the past since, say, I believe it was 2016, 2017. I have talked to them recently, but I have not retained them in any way or paid for anything from them. I've met with, I believe, Mike Bowman, but I have not.
And the only reason I'm
I
bringing it up-
understand why you're going there.
Well, no, we just got a packet in the mail. And everyone got it at election time about conflicts of interest, and it just kicked. And I just. I
It
just
wasn't
want-
from me.
Mike Bowman is my nephew. I think out of an abundance of caution, I am going to recuse myself from this public hearing.
If we just may, real quickly, we certainly don't object to your recusal. Our position would be that, my understanding is he's not engaged Hitchcock. We don't believe you need to recuse yourself, but it is ultimately up to you, Mr. Commissioner, as to what you want to do.
So, Commissioner Bowman, I mean, it would be, the decision's up to you on a conflict. If you feel that there is a conflict that may sway your judgment, then you can recuse yourself. Otherwise, you've stated it on the record, and you've heard that there's no financial connection between the entity and the applicant.
Okay, in that case, I will stay.
Okay.
Okay, floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk real quickly about the changes we made. Mr. Smith would then like to come up and make some comments. I don't think it'll take too long. And then I'll circle back and we can go through any questions, but I did kind of want to give a quick overview of what we've done here. First, we got rid of the word greenhouse. We heard the commission. We have changed it to an enclosed structure, which structure shall be sufficiently enclosed as to prevent odor from escaping, which could be a nuisance to surrounding properties. So we're trying to listen to the commission here, and we think that the issue is the ability to escape, odor to escape, among other things. And if you come in with a loosey-goosey greenhouse or a hoop house or something like that, there is no way to control, really, if it's like a plastic greenhouse, it's hard to control. You can't control that odor. But it is possible to have an enclosed structure that is up to this commission when someone makes a special permit application, whether it is sufficient to prevent odor from escaping, which would be a nuisance. I want to circle back to, this is not a special permit application. This is not about Mr. Smith's property. This is not about the specific odor control mechanisms that would be used at Mr. Smith's property. This is about a zone text change. This is for a special permit. So the rules for a special permit are, if the applicant meets all of the criteria, the commission has to grant the permit. However, it is up to the commission to decide whether the applicant meets all of the criteria. So this gives you, the commission, the right to say, this building's not going to work. It's not sufficiently enclosed so as to prevent odor from escaping to nearby properties. It gives you, the commission, the regulatory authority to decide which buildings, which enclosed structures will meet it and which ones will not. Second thing we primarily did is the concern about odor that I understood from the last hearing was largely about enforceability, among other things. That if there are odor issues arising from a property in Cheshire, how is the ZEO, how is the town planner to regulate these things? We went back and forth internally with some technologies that we talked about last time, like olfactometers and things like that. The problem with that is it sets a criteria into your zone text amendments that a year down the road when someone applies for a special permit may not be the best criteria for odor mitigation. That specific kind of language is best left for the special conditions that you as a commission can impose on any special permit that comes in under these regulations. What we did make sure is that there are now teeth to this. So the way we wrote this is actually based on language from a Massachusetts town called Beckett, Massachusetts. The way they did it is if there are complaints, if there are 5 complaints within a 2-week period of odor issues arising from the cannabis establishment, that person, that applicant, then they are required to meet with the ZEO to see if there is anything that can be done to mitigate those odor issues, or if the ZEO can require additional odor mitigation measures. If there continue to be complaints after that, you as the commission can then hold a hearing to revoke the special permit. So there are now teeth to this. Additionally, I've included in the packet, after the letters of support, and after a couple other things, at the end, a couple of the last 4 pages are copies of environmental health and environmental regulations that already exist in the state. These are the mechanisms that already exist to deal with odor nuisance complaints. So if there are odor complaints, these mechanisms already exist. And one of them is you can file a complaint with DEEP. And they have specific criteria to determine whether or not there is a nuisance odor. Indeed, some of the regulations in here even include criteria such as if a sample of the alleged nuisance air is mixed with 7 parts, so 1 part of the alleged nuisance air, 7 parts clean air, if you can still smell the odor, it's a nuisance. This criteria already exists in the law and in the regulations. Additionally, the local health district, the Chesprocott Health District, has the authority to issue abatement orders regarding nuisance and to enforce those orders if necessary in court. And those fines can be significant, up to $250 a day for any time that odor continues the order is not abided by. But this is in addition to, we've kept all that in. We note in the proposed zone text change that none of what we are doing here impacts the ability of the state agencies, the local health agencies, or anyone else to regulate nuisance, nor does it limit the ability of the town to regulate nuisance. So in addition to all of the existing ability that this town has to regulate nuisance, there's now a new teeth to this, that if there are complaints about this facility, or whatever facility is regulated under this, you now have the ability to hold a hearing to revoke that special permit. Now, that's something that you have to provide due process to the special permit holder, of course, but you would still be able to have that hearing, and now it's written into the regulation itself. We are hopeful that these respond to the concerns that we've heard from this commission. I know there are concerns about trying to set objective odor measurement levels and setting a baseline. Again, that kind of already exists with the state regulations and the 7-to-1 odor analysis, but even that is up to whoever's smelling it and how sensitive their nose is. So all of that is going to best work at the special permit condition level, where you will be able to see the exact air filtration mechanisms that the applicant proposes to use, how much cubic feet per minute of air they're going to have to treat, how many egress points there are going to be to the building, how many egress points there will be for ventilation, and you as the commission will then have the authority to impose conditions on those applications as they come in. So they are applicant-specific, property-specific, and will be able to work going forward to provide both you the flexibility to regulate and propose what you want to propose as conditions. And if the applicant comes before you and they have a greenhouse that's made of plastic tarps and they're not ventilating properly, you don't have to grant them a special permit. You are the ones who get to decide under these criteria whether the applicant meets the criteria for the special permit. I also want to emphasize that, before I turn it over to Mr. Smith, we've now had 3 public hearings on this. There has been, I believe, a single public comment at the first hearing that was generally opposed but still willing to hear more about this. They weren't here for this application. They were here for another application and only mentioned this because they happened to be here. In the record, there is a single odor complaint of Mr. Smith's facility that has been operating for years. Under these proposed regulations, if he were to apply for a special permit, he would be growing the same plant, Cannabis sativa. Same plant, same exact plant. It's just stronger. And again, I want to point out, in the years he's been operating, there has been a single odor complaint. We provided numerous letters of support from Mr. Smith's neighbors. Mr. Smith also pulled out, within this packet, the comments from the May 8th, 2023 hearing regarding cannabis. There have been numerous comments. It's the second to last, right before the regulations at the end. There have been numerous comments throughout these hearings that the town was opposed to all forms of cannabis. That is not the case. That is not what happened at the May 8th, 2023 public hearing. The town was opposed to retail, and they were very adamantly opposed to retail. There's no question about that. We're not asking for retail. The only person who mentioned cultivation at the May 2023 hearing was for it, was for cultivation. Additionally, and I think Mr. Smith is going to point this out because he has gone through all of the prior public hearings on cannabis in this town, a number of even the commissioners on this commission were in favor of cultivation. And it appears that, at least publicly, the reasons they've given for changing their mind are that the public was against it. That is not, again, I point out, that is not the case. The May 2023 hearing very clearly shows the public was against retail sales. We're not asking for retail. We don't want anything to do with retail sales. they were for cultivation. The only comment at the hearing was for cultivation. So I just want to point that out again because I feel it's important for this commission to understand we're now at our third hearing. The last two hearings, no one has come from the public to oppose this. Mr. Smith will also point this out. All these are recorded and they're shown on YouTube. The average numbers for a general planning and zoning hearing are maybe around 100 views. The last couple have gotten 400 plus views. So people are paying attention to this and they're interested in it, but they're not opposing it. You're not getting letters from people opposing this. Again, I want to reiterate, Mr. Smith is already growing cannabis on his property. He's growing cannabis sativa right now. This town permits cannabis as agriculture, or hemp as agriculture. Because hemp is agriculture, under the statutes, it is exempted from odor nuisance. Agriculture is exempted from odor nuisance under the statutes. Cannabis, under the statutes, is not agriculture. You now get to regulate the odor issues that you couldn't regulate before because it was hemp and it was agriculture. It's now cannabis. You get to regulate it. You're the ones who get to decide whether all of this makes sense for a specific application. You're the ones who get to decide. These are the conditions we want to put on this specific application so that we can make sure it's not going to be a nuisance to the neighbors. If hemp and cannabis growing was a nuisance, we would have heard of it many times over from the public, and we're not hearing that. This is something that you, as the commission, get to decide if the odor control mechanisms are going to be sufficient when the application comes before you. You're the ones who get to decide if the security measures are going to be sufficient when the application comes before you. This plan gives you, the commission, the opportunity to regulate this that you currently don't have. And we think that is the best way forward. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Smith so he can make his speech, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions, if that's okay. Unless,
You don't want to take any questions beforehand, if there are any? I mean, I don't know if anyone has questions
okay
on
with me
what
taking
was already
questions
said.
now? Then I'm
Either
happy
look-
to,
yeah.
happy to take
Mr.
questions
Aft.
now.
This came up in the first hearing about security.
Yes.
Can you just state again for the record how many thefts there have been in that kind of facility?
So certainly in Connecticut,
Yeah.
under the since the DCP regulations have been enacted, we are not aware of a single theft from any cultivator or manufacturer. I think there may have been an attempted theft from a retail unit in Stamford at some point, but again, no confirmed thefts from any cultivators or any manufacturers in the state of Connecticut. The only theft we have been able to find from any cultivator in any state is from Washington State in the 2010s, well before a lot of this regulation at the state level was worked out. And they simply, as far as I understand, I don't have all of the details on that one, but I understand they didn't have the type of state regulations that the DCP has now. And again, since the DCP security regulations have been implemented, there have been no thefts from facilities like the ones proposed here. And in the last packet you received, you'll note those DCP regulations are not light, they're thick. There's a lot that any individual applicant needs to prove to the DCP before they'll even get a provisional license, let alone a final license. So security is something that is very much a concern to us, and we think we've addressed it very well in here, in addition to the fact that they're going to have to follow the DCP regulations, or there's no license.
Oh, thank you for your comments. And I just wanted to say, I've only been doing this 2 years, and I'm impressed with every time you come back, you answer our questions and
Well, again,
and find the answers, willing to try and get this done. And whatever happens, you should be proud of it.
well, I appreciate that. And again, I understand we have not always been perfect in the responses to the questions that the commission has had. We're trying our best here to work. And again, I really do think this is something that can work and something that makes sense at this level for you to then be able to regulate in more detail when the permit applications come in.
Mr. McKinney?
I'm brand new to the commission.
Yep, and you gotta press that.
I'm brand new to the commission, so I don't have the background. I do have questions. If I were to vote, I would have to go back through all the records, et cetera, and and I'm not sure that I'll be able to do that in a timely fashion. But my questions are, I find that 5 complaints in a 2-week period is not what I would consider reasonable. I would say 5 complaints in a 4-month period, I would see as being not an issue. But somebody complained 4 times in a 2-week and it's not enough to trigger something? Okay. The other question, if this involves a zone change, I live in a residential area. I want my residential area to always be residential area, and there better be a darn good reason to change. What is the benefit to the residents of Cheshire to grant a zone change? And you may have gone through it previously, and I apologize, but it wasn't.
Understood,
Okay.
and happy to answer the questions.
Thank you.
The first one, we're certainly, timing-wise, we have a bit of a wall tonight in that we have X number of days after the application of our, after the filing of our application to finalize the public hearings. Your next hearing is December 22nd. It's too far beyond. So we either have to come to terms tonight or potentially withdraw the application and reapply. We really don't want to withdraw the application and reapply. We'd like to try to get this through tonight. So, as Mr. Smith said, you're probably sick of hearing from us at this point. So that is something that we would absolutely, I'd be happy to talk to my client if we could take a couple-minute break between here to see if, I think, I agree, 4 in 2 weeks, we pulled that from the Beckett regulations. That may be too light. Maybe something like 4 or 5 in 4 months or 5 in 3 months, something like that to give it more teeth to this body and to Mr. Glidden to be able to enforce against that. I think that's something.
So you're saying, Jim, you're saying in the 2 weeks, it's not enough time, so
It's
you
not
might
in
not
my-
get 5, yeah.
Right.
You might have to go.
I think that makes that as a perfectly reasonable comment, and
Yeah.
it's something that I think that we can work out and come up with some different language right here on the spot that would be better for that. With response to your second question, what this is doing is changing the text of the zoning regulations to permit cannabis cultivation in very limited areas of the industrial zone. So it's the industrial zone with, you have to be frontage on East Johnson Avenue, Diana Court, Burton Avenue, or McCausland Court. So essentially that business park to the east side of Route 10 toward the north of town, off of East Johnson Avenue. It limits it to that area. So it is only applicable to industrial properties, and it's only applicable to properties in that area. Further, the regulations state that you need to be at least 1,000 feet from the structure engaged in the cultivation. It needs to be at least 1,000 feet from any residential structures, 1,500 feet from any schools, daycares, or nursery schools, and 1,500 feet from any churches or places of worship. So it's not something that could happen to a residential property in the middle of a residential zone. You simply wouldn't be able to meet the distance requirements. But it's not asking for a zone map change. We're not asking to change the zone of any property from, say, residential to industrial. We're merely asking to permit cannabis cultivation in this very narrow and defined area of the already existing industrial zone. Again, theoretically, someone could come before you with a map change and ask to change a property in the middle of the residential zone to industrial and change this regulation to include their street. Because of the distance separation requirements, it would be very unlikely for that to be able to play out in any kind of residential area because you'd have to be 1,000 feet from any other residential structure. I hope that answers the question.
No,
Okay.
it didn't, because the question was, what benefit is it to the town? I know it's not going in a residential area.
Okay.
If something were to go in a residential area, it would have to be some benefit to the town.
Correct.
To make this huge exception. What's the benefit to the town to do the changes that you want?
So again, the best way to explain this, and I tried to explain this to a court once, hemp was a cash crop until Connecticut legalized marijuana. Everyone wants the stronger stuff. There's more money in cannabis and marijuana than there is in growing hemp, particularly now with the most recent Big Beautiful Bill that does limit in a number of ways how hemp can be used. By permitting a property that is in this very limited zone up there to transition or become a cannabis cultivator, it allows that business to grow, bring in more employees. And because of that, it meets with the plan of conservation and development that the town put together that specifically talks about bringing in more employees to that industrial area up there. And the reason we drafted the regulations the way we did is they're based on the regulations that the town drafted after the moratorium, which the town already confirmed meets the plan of conservation and development. The benefit is it allows the business to grow. It allows the business to bring in more investment into the town. And because it's so limited in its geographical area, there's really only about 15 or 16 properties within that business zone that could fit this criteria. So it's going to be very limited to where it could be. Additionally, we've included in this, and part of these are duplicates to what you've already seen in your other packets, letters of support from almost all of the other businesses that are adjacent to Mr. Smith, but certainly many of the businesses within that industrial zone supporting this. So we don't see this as a major exemption to the existing zoning regs because it's utilizing an existing industrial area. Again, this is not about the special permit, it's about the text change. So I don't want to go too far down the road of the facility because it's not really what it's about, but practically speaking, the person who's going to apply under this is Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, as I pointed out, is already growing hemp at his facility. By passing these regulations and permitting him to change to cannabis, you, as a commission, have a lot more control over that because it's going to be permitted as a special permit as opposed to just permitted as agriculture. Additionally, as I pointed out before, hemp is agriculture. It is not covered, it's exempt, I should say, it's not that it's not covered, it is exempted from nuisance odor laws by statute. Cannabis, by statute, is not agriculture. So by permitting this and by moving over to cannabis, it permits an existing hemp site, for example, to actually be more regulated by the town with respect to odor and nuisance issues than it currently is.
Thank you.
Ironically, you could grow hemp in a residential area in this town.
And another point to make, while we do have this,
I mean, as a hemp business, not a
right.
Yeah, not a six plant. You
But
could you could grow. Yeah.
To that point, Mr. Chairman, the single complaint we have on the record is assigned to this facility. It is always theoretically possible that the neighbor could have been growing their 6 home plants, and that's where the smell's coming from. So part of what we have put in here is, while the applicant, after a certain number of complaints, and we can work on that, would have to meet with the town staff and then ultimately you, they can rebut that complaint by showing, if they have those kind of olfactometers at the air egress points, it wasn't us. We can prove on that day that our odor was below the detectable limit. Again, cannabis can be grown in anybody's residential house, up to 6 plants. So we had a dinner the other night for the firm in our Christmas party, and we went out, and as we were walking down the street in Hartford, one of the older partners behind me said, ever since they passed that law, everything smells like San Francisco around here. You don't know, your neighbor could be sitting outside in their backyard smoking a joint. that's what you could be smelling. We want, however, to give you the ability to regulate that odor and nuisance as it arises from a cannabis facility. And right now, you don't have that really with hemp. And we think that's a really strong point here. I believe Mr. Smith would like to jump in, so.
I just want to add one thing to the question that Commissioner McMurray had. What is it good for the town? And I'm going to have to do a lot of renovations on my enclosed structure in order to get it to be what we want. And so I absolutely want to use local businesses to do that. Commissioner Bowman mentioned FF Hitchcock, and I've had conversations with them, and I'm not going one way or the other, but we also have SEMA Drilling in town. And I'm putting in geothermal, or I would like to put in geothermal if this goes through. And SEMA Drilling is going to cost a lot. So we're using local businesses to probably do a $4 or $5 million project. And I think that's a benefit to the town. So thank you.
Mr. Bone.
You keep digging my hole deeper.
Sorry. That was a good answer, though, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't a good answer. You want to know the truth? No, it wasn't a good answer. It was a smart-ass answer.
No, it
You
isn't.
want to know the truth. Could you define structure for me, please?
Sure, structure is actually defined by your zoning regulations, I believe. Hold on, I just had them up a minute ago. And I apologize, I should have had this with me. Okay. There we go. Definitions. Structure. So your definitions define structure as anything constructed or erected, the use of which requires location on the ground or attachment to something having location on the ground, including storage trailers, greenhouses, carports, membrane houses, etc. So we tried to use your own language. And again, I understand there's a concern about the concept of greenhouses. I want to reiterate, a greenhouse on its own cannot meet these regulations with respect to odor and even security and things like that. So an enclosed structure that you, as the commission, get to decide if it is sufficiently enclosed so as to prevent nuisance odor from escaping. So whenever an application comes before you, it will be up to you.
Just in your answer and in our regulations, it says greenhouses. There's not an expert here in HVAC, other than possibly me, but I don't even want to claim to be an expert, that knows about HVAC systems, recycling systems, makeup air, all the things that go into that. But under our regulation, a greenhouse is allowed. I would be much more comfortable with this if it was a building and not a structure under our regulation.
Understood. And again, we wanted to use both the looseness of your own regulations along with the strict requirements for odor control to kind of put those two things together. The text amendment can't be read just in individual parts. One of the most fundamental basic understandings of statutory and regulatory interpretation is that it has to be read as a whole to make sense as a whole. So while we understand the concern about the use of a greenhouse, it's simply not something that under these regulations, you wouldn't be able to apply for a special permit for a greenhouse, as it were, and necessarily meet all of the odor regulations. But you could have a type of structure that has greenhouse-like conditions, like using glass or some sort of plastic for the roof and some of the sides, so that you can still control the escape of air. Now, ultimately, whether it's in a building or a greenhouse, it requires ventilation. One of the concerns was talking about greenhouses is because it requires ventilation. It gets really hot in there. The same thing applies to a building with cannabis, because you have to regulate, as Mr. Sima pointed out last time, you have to regulate the CO2 and the oxygen levels. So when the oxygen levels get too high in the building, you still have to vent. It doesn't change whether or not there's ventilation just because it's a greenhouse or not a greenhouse. That doesn't impact whether or not there's ventilation. There's still ventilation. And the control of the odor comes from those ventilation points. Again, it would be up to you as the commission, when someone comes before you, to determine, is this structure sufficiently enclosed to prevent the escape of odors? If you don't believe it is, it's up to you to make that decision as the commission. It gives you that authority. But
See,
I
don't
understand.
feel that it does. I feel that if it meets our regulation and we pass this zone tax change, that we are going to be required to allow you to build it. Where I could see is in a factory, and I'm gonna use factory in a clean room, because that air has to be
Of course.
controlled.
Of course.
If there is not a structure but a building, and if you are growing in a section and storing in a section, and then there is an airlock,
You can do the same thing with a greenhouse.
He mentioned that last time. I mean, it's going to take a lot more. I'm not an HVAC expert, but in a greenhouse, there's going to be a lot more ventilation, which
Exactly.
I'm sure you're aware of.
Yep.
But that's our control. I mean, they can't just come in here with the ventilation options that a building would be. It's going to have to be a much more advanced system, because there'll be a lot more ventilation for a
with
greenhouse.
a building, I would feel it's more controlled, where you have temperature control. So where, EJ, and I'm just not trying to.
I know,
But I'm just saying, in your greenhouses in the spring, you have automatic
Vents.
vents, thank you, that open and close as the temperature increases or decreases.
Correct.
Okay. He's not gonna have that, because he's not gonna be able to vent to the exterior. Therefore, there's gotta be some sort of temperature control, not in a greenhouse, but in a building where they can control the temperature.
But what I remember what he said was it was technically like a greenhouse inside of a greenhouse. So when your greenhouse is going to heat up, your vents might open, but the air where the plants are being grown cannot escape through the vents of the greenhouse.
Or if it does need to escape, because
There's a-
ultimately, you do need to vent the air. Otherwise, you just have O2 buildup and
Well,
all
that
the
the
plants
air
will
that's
die.
the greenhouse that's inside the greenhouse
And-
is the treated air that would come out.
Exactly.
It's like building, the way he mentioned it was a greenhouse inside of a greenhouse.
Yeah, no,
And the
no,
reason
I
for it was the
understand.
light, that
Yes.
they'd rather have the light for the
No,
plants,
believe
which
me, I
is,
understand, but the scrubbers he was talking about were, they would need, you know.
I would like it,
and
I need the
if we ever
calculations,
got to
but
that.
we would need a lot, because you're talking about each one was like 4,000 CFM or 6,000 CFM.
And that
I'm
is
trying to do
all-
it from memory, and I'm sorry.
And I believe that's approximately correct, about 4,000 CFM. But I want to point out again, you would have the discretion. This is a special permit. This is not a site plan. It's not a administrative approval. It's not something that you have to approve. You, as the commission, the law states, you as the commission get to decide whether the application meets the criteria. So I understand there are concerns about ventilation, but the point is all of that ventilated air is going to be scrubbed. And whether it's coming out of something that has a glass ceiling or doesn't have a glass ceiling doesn't change how that scrubbing is going to work. It may change how often the air needs to be ventilated, because as you point out, in a greenhouse in the spring, it's going to get warmer. And in addition to the O2, CO2, you also have to deal with the warmth and bring in cooler air from the outside. All of that air still has to be scrubbed before it goes outside. And you, as the commission, would be the ones to determine if that CFM is enough for the permit at the time, because it's your discretion. It's a discretionary permit. You're the ones who get to decide if the applicant coming before you meets the criteria. It's not a site plan. It's not something where they come before you, they check off 6 boxes, and you have to say yes. It's a special permit. You have the discretion here to decide.
And we could say yes with a building too. I mean, if they had a building and there's going to be experts here that are going to tell you whether the air is being scrubbed or not, whether it's in a building or whether it's in a greenhouse.
So, just one suggestion to you. So let's say, perfect world, in Mr. Smith's perfect world, we approve this text amendment. Down the road, he applies for a special permit. Under your current regs, you can invoke a third party. So you could get, if he brings his experts in at their cost, you could bring a third party in to do an analysis of the ventilation system. So you'll have 2 experts reviewing it. So you are protected in that sense. And Attorney Hollister is right. The special permit gives you a higher degree of discretion than a site plan, obviously. However, if they demonstrate compliance to all those special standards, you are by law obligated to approve that special permit. So Commissioner Bowman, you are correct. I mean,
Would it be obligated by a building or a greenhouse? Because it's a
Correct.
structure, but you could turn around and say no if you don't think
If you-
that the air can be
What I would-
exchanged without the
what I would suggest,
of odor.
if that was an issue, now we're in hypothetical, you have a special permit pending, you would get a third-party independent review that the town, you have every rights under your regs to invoke, just like you do for a traffic engineer or an outside engineering consulting firm. We could get someone to review a ventilation plan, should this regulation be approved, and then have 2 parties, and then, let's say the 2 experts disagree. You have the right as a commission going, we disagree with the applicant's presentation, our guy or our firm said, no. this won't work."
we can do it whether it's a building or a greenhouse.
Correct.
You could
Because
do
you're
it
gonna have
both
that
ways. You could still
third-party
do it.
option
If you
to
were okay
basically
with, a
check
building,
everything.
you still have the third party come in.
And just to follow up on that, Mr. Glidden, would you like that to be written into the regs, that the town has the right to, because I think it's
No,
already
we have
part
it
of your
already.
regulations, that
We
it's already.
We already
yeah,
have it.
You already have that, right?
In our fee
So,
structure, we
okay.
have a third-party
Okay.
review option. So it can be invoked for any experts. So that's why I'm
Yep.
saying, that's specific to the ventilation design, et cetera.
Yeah. And I did used to work for Mr. Hollister,
sorry,
but that's
yeah.
okay. I'm just joking. So I know that can be a rough name in this town sometimes.
PTSD.
So yes, there's a couple towns I'm still not allowed to go to, but yeah.
He's welcome. We get along.
Mr. Selmon has a question.
You mentioned that THC containing cannabis is stronger stuff. Is the smell also stronger?
The
than
smell can be
hemp?
a little bit different because of the type of terpene. So, cannabis is a plant that contains THC. It has tetrahydrocannabinol. It has a bunch of other stuff in it too: CBD, CBG, THCA. The other things that are in cannabis are called terpenes. And terpenes are really what create the terpenes and the volatile organic compounds coming off of the plant are what create the smells. In commercially grown hemp, the terpene mix is going to be slightly different than the terpene mix that you might find in recreational cannabis.
But the overall smell, is it stronger or same as hemp?
I believe the intensity of the smell would be the same. It may be a slightly different smell because the terpene mix and things are different. But again, from the plant perspective, the THC is just one of the many components in the plant. And whether it's at 0.3% or 13% or 26%, it's not going to have a significant impact on the smell.
Yeah, and I drive by Diana Court and I smell pot now. you drive by, was it Watertown, Waterbury, wherever that facility is now, you smell pot. And, you know, what we have to do is determine whether this zone regulation change not only benefits the town, but outweighs any negatives.
Absolutely.
And that's a challenge.
I understand that. I would reiterate again that as a hemp farmer now, Mr. Smith is exempted largely from nuisance odor regulations by statute. Agriculture, by statute, is exempted from odor nuisance.
You remember, this is for the whole town, though.
Understood. Understood.
So he you know, you changed the regs and special permit number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4.
And I want to go back to some of the stuff we covered at the prior hearing. The number of special permits issued by the state is incredibly small. Or the number of licenses, I apologize. You issue the special permit, the state issues the license. We provided that information last time. We're talking
This is
2 or 3 dozen.
This doesn't. What about next year? The year after? Next
So again,
decade?
there is no plan as of, and this is part of what we provided to you with the DCP documents, there's no plan to reopen the lottery for cultivation licenses. So that number is going to remain very small. And again, I want to point out, this gives you the ability to regulate that odor. This gives you that ability to regulate that odor. You're the ones who get to decide, is this building going to be enough? Is this air ventilation going to be enough? And then once you've decided that, it still gives you the ability to come back and enforce against it. And taking into consideration the comments from the commissioner earlier, I talked to my client, we would be more than happy with, how about 5 complaints in 3 months? Would that be sufficient for the commission to, instead of 5 complaints in 2 weeks?
So the only problem I have with that is that the smell varies based on the season. When it's hot
Yes.
and humid out there, it's going to smell worse. Maybe when it's really cold and dry. I don't know plants, but so I don't know what the right answer is. You know, as far as that section goes, I look at the whole thing and you know, I'll base my vote on the whole thing, but it would certainly need to be more than 5 in 2 weeks.
And like I said, we would more
Unless
than
the
willing
same person complains 5 times in 2 weeks, I don't know if that would qualify or not.
So
but-
the way it's written right now is it would have to be 5 separate households.
Yeah.
Because one of the things my client is concerned about is, say one person in town is really against this.
Right.
They just call in, maybe they're not even
Yeah,
selling
that's-
anything.
I
They
get
call
it.
in, so there has to be some sort of
Yeah, I get
protection
it.
for the applicant. But again, we tried to give you this opportunity to now have these teeth. And as the commissioner pointed, we would be happy to change that right now on the spot to 5 complaints within 3 months instead of 2 weeks.
3 months, we worry about the seasons. The seasons, you know, they change in the 3 months, so.
Yeah, so if you have a cold week and then a warm week, it gives people plenty of time to be able to accumulate those complaints. And again, I would point out that it still gives my client, or whoever the applicant is, the ability to contest that when he has the meeting with your town enforcement officer or with this commission, because he may be able to prove that on April 5th, you know, I can prove that the levels of odor at my property boundaries were non-detectable.
And that was the other issue I have with that too. I was reading your proposed regulation. Employ odor control technology, remove odors and VOCs. Permit the establishment to install olfactory meters on the property. You're trusting that your equipment is working properly, installed properly,
Absolutely.
calibrated. Cheshire doesn't have an olfactory meter.
Of course. And
So, you know, I feel like there's an opportunity there to be manipulated or finagled in some way, shape, or form. I just, real life, you smell it. And I think John and I were talking about this at one point. It's the only thing you could smell 3 cars up going 75 miles an hour. You don't smell cigarette or cigar or anything else, but for some reason, pot you could smell. And in a massive facility in Watertown, within 5 miles of that place, you can smell it. And they have scrubbers, don't they? I think, Mike, they have air of some sort up there.
I can't speak to the Watertown location. I can tell you the Simsbury
Yes.
location does.
yes,
And
they
does-
do have scrubbers.
And does
They
it,
have-
and does it smell with
In
it?
certain weather conditions, while I was there, we received complaints. I don't know if those have been fully, I can't speak to that at this point. But I will say that, you know, my experience, yeah, they had full charcoal scrubbers, filters, et cetera.
Yeah.
And when it was rainy and 40 degrees, you smelt the plant outside the building
Yep,
for a large area,
yep.
so.
Again, it will be up to you as the commission to decide when an actual application comes before you, whether the odor control technology is sufficient.
I guess what I'm trying to say is no matter how good and what country you buy it from and what plan you have, it never completely eliminates it.
I think there is a point to that. I would agree with you at a level that there's always going to be some level of odor. Ideally, it's non-detectable to the point where you can't smell it. That's the goal, is to get it to non-detect, so that you can't smell it. We wanted to give this teeth. When we came here before you last time,
No,
we understood there were no teeth to this.
And I appreciate the changes you've made. It's going to be a tough decision for me.
I understand that. And, you know, we're, again, here for questions. We do have this line tonight where we kind of have to close the hearing.
Yep.
But, you know, you are more than welcome to deliberate over this for multiple hearings if necessary. And, you know, ultimately that will be your decision as to how you want to approach this. But we very much understand your concerns. And I would hope that because of the discretionary nature of the special permit, you're the ones, Mr. Glidden is right. If you decide that all of the criteria are met, you have to grant the permit. But for a special permit, you, the commission, get to decide if the criteria are met. So you have that discretion to say this odor control system's going to work. I understand that the town doesn't have an olfactometer. One of the things that we were concerned about was adding to Mr. Glidden's workload. He has many hats, and this is not something that we want him to be dealing with every day, of course. So by merely limiting it, or by proposing it in such a way that it's based on the complaints coming in, it's not like Mr. Glidden has to go out and test the olfactometer at the property line on a regular basis. That's not fair to the town staff to have to expend those kind of resources. This is something, and you're right. I mean, of course, if my client or any applicant is going to come in and use their olfactometer readings to try to rebut things, they're going to have to be able to show that it was calibrated correctly and all of those other things, and it's still going to be your decision based on weighing the evidence as to how you want to proceed forward. So I very much understand those concerns, but I think those are concerns that can be dealt with through the process that we've written out here.
Case.
Yeah, I've heard a lot, and I appreciate the fact that you obviously want this very badly. You've spent a lot of money. You have a lawyer who is spending a lot of time on this. I have absolutely no problem with it. I don't smell any marijuana when I go down near Diana Court. The only marijuana I smell is my neighbor out on his back deck smoking marijuana. I smell people who have smoked it on them, and cigarettes and all of that. I don't smell it any different than someone who's fertilized their lawn, my neighbor who I have no say over what they dump on their lawn or whatever smells are on it. I just think it's someone that's trying to invest in the town of Cheshire. One of my biggest things with any future developments is traffic. You answered my question that it's not going to cause an increase in traffic. One of the biggest complaints I hear from everyone in Cheshire is traffic, 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 traffic. This isn't going to hurt traffic. It's not going to increase traffic. It may or may not bring in more tax revenue. I don't know. They're obviously going to invest in the infrastructure. They might hire people from Cheshire. I have no idea who they're going to hire. I see nothing negative to the town of Cheshire from my perspective with this development. And if we vote, or when we vote, I will be voting for this.
Mr. Harrison.
A question for staff. Do we have any other regulations for any other businesses for odors in town? No. And in the industrial area, are there producers of of manufacturing that use hydrocarbons? Are you aware of?
Well, I mean, you have, for example, over off of West Main Street, you have the petroleum-based products that generates quite a smell from Dalton in the summer when the plant's operating. So, but that's,
But there are
there was
other-
no regulations
there
for
are no
this,
other regulations for any
except
other
for the state
business.
statutes that the attorney referenced earlier, which really boils down to a civil issue between the complaining party and the operator. The town's not involved in it, we do not regulate that.
Okay, Thank you.
I would just like to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Selma, I have
I
one more
just,
comment.
to comment on that comment, you provided Section 31 prohibited uses. 31.2 prohibits ammonia, chlorine, petrochemicals, all the stuff that would smell nasty. That's current zoning reg, correct?
That's correct.
So John, really, there shouldn't be anything that smells in town because we prohibit it.
No, that's not true.
Is this prohibition, is this for industrial, or what is that?
That's, that prohibition is townwide, but you have. to-
Dalton's grandfathered in.
Dalton's
That's,
grandfathered in.
but as of this second, theoretically, there is nothing that would cause a smell in town,
Well, I mean.
besides agriculture.
In that vicinity of this, of Mr. Smith's property, not to get too specific about the property, you have
Mm-hmm.
the transfer station that's there.
Yeah, I see that does not apply to municipal dumping,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it's AJ's transfer
Yeah.
facility, that there are smells that come there. You have the Dunkin' Donuts processing or manufacturing facilities there.
Shouldn't that smell pretty good, though?
It smells, no, it is smells that exit an industrially zoned business, so to say, your question about other smells, yeah.
Okay.
And to, I apologize, sorry, go ahead.
No, I smell cars in this town. When they're idling on a hot 90-degree day and you're sitting in traffic, I smell the carbon, whatever cars emit. I don't know what, I'm not a scientist, but I smell that. There are many smells I don't love, but I don't smell anything on Diana Court.
It was the middle of the summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, maybe I have a permanent cold. I don't really.
My wife has that, yeah.
I would like to point out that while we've talked about the property, and I understand this is not about the property itself, it's the text amendment, nonetheless, the fact that it's Mr. Smith here, the property comes into question. Mr. Smith has letters from most of the other adjacent businesses, all the other adjacent businesses, in fact, the adjacent businesses to him in that business industrial park supporting this application, all of them supporting this application. And I'd also like to point out, there was a comment made last week about being able to regulate the nuisance odors the way that lights are regulated. And we think it does that here in the sense that if you look at the zoning regulations, you're not regulating based on you can't have 0.3 lumens on your neighbor's property. It's not based on lumens, it's based on you're not gonna have light getting onto your neighbor's property. That's the idea, and that's what we're doing here, is the idea is you're not supposed to have nuisance odors that escape to neighboring properties and create a nuisance. And if you do, and you get complaints about it, you as the commission now have the ability to do something about that, to either demand more odor mitigation, or to, if necessary, revoke the permit. And again, it will be up to you at the special permit stage when the application comes before you to decide this odor mitigation plan is enough. If it's not, if you don't think it's enough, if you don't think it meets the criteria that it will prevent nuisance odors from getting onto the neighboring property, then it does not meet the criteria for the special permit, and you do not have to grant it. You have to decide, in order to grant the special permit, that it meets all of the application criteria. You have that discretion. And if it doesn't, then only if it does, only if it meets all the criteria, are you then required to grant the permit. But you get to decide if it meets the criteria.
Okay, I think we're ready to hear from Mr. Smith. I did just wanted to, there is one person in the audience.
Of course.
Did you want to speak on this at all?
No, I'm
You
not
can speak.
here for this. I'm here for something that I think might be under new business, but I'm just here to listen.
Just here to,
I have no interest in this whatsoever.
sounds great to me. No, Mr. Smith, if you want to, we have fans.
Well, this was supposed to be in the beginning, but, and some of it probably has been covered, but I'd like to do this again for our new commissioner, if nothing else, visit some of the history. But I'd like to take time to enter into the public record some of the materials I presented to you, as well as testimony and comments that were made at public hearings and P&Z meetings concerning this subject. I feel that it is important to make corrections to some comments previously made by this commission. I bear no animosity toward anyone in this room. As a taxpayer and landowner in Cheshire for over 20 years, I feel I have the right to receive a fair and open hearing. These hearings are watched by the public. There have been over 400 views, as Mr. Horlier said, of our last two meetings, which is 2 to 3 times the number of views of any other public hearings in the last several years. This indicates to me that the public is extremely interested in your deliberations concerning our application. First, I'd like to note the letters of support from neighbors in my business park that have been entered into the record. As I just recently said, this represents 100% of my neighbors in my industrial park, which are 6, as well as my immediate neighbor to the right, CK Greenhouses. Additionally, a letter has been entered into the record for several citizens of Cheshire. They were kind enough to sign in my support. This commission has stated multiple times throughout this hearing that prior statements by members of the public were opposed to cultivation of cannabis here in Cheshire. That is entirely false, and the statements from the record show that. You have in your packets that testimony. I'd like to go back a bit from the moratorium meeting in 2022. At 31:32 of the meeting, Chairman Kurtz stated, I don't know about the rest of the commissioners up here, but when we first started talking about this, I thought it was more the sale. The cultivator, to me, it doesn't really make sense, but I think he makes a lot of sense. I think he was referring to me. By the way, I was the only person from the public to testify at that meeting. I mean, it's a business we have in town. He's not selling it, he's growing it. I'd be interested in taking it out if you people would agree with me. Take cultivator part out of this ban so his business would go. Commissioner Downs then said, I agree with EJ and that I would like to be able to allow you to do that because it's going to happen anyway. I'd rather see it happen in Cheshire. Chairman Kurtz then stated, when I saw the cultivator on there, I didn't really understand why we're denying the right to grow. He's not selling in this town. Dispensaries are what I was more concerned about. As far as cultivator, I was kind of unsure of why we had it in there. Commissioner Downs stated, and then you're saying people come in from out of state. That's really not fair. If you're a local person who wants to grow, and it seems to me it's equitable because you already have the business here. Equity is what we're talking about here. Vice Chairman Natal stated, if I could, I just want to clarify, I am not against Cheshire continuing to be a farming community. Cultivation, I think, is acceptable. I'm not against it, just want to make sure we have the proper regulations in place. At 57 minutes, 51 seconds of the meeting, Commissioner Strollo said, also with the person who spoke, you know, he's already doing this. You don't want to limit him from going forward either. At 1:06 of the meeting, Chairman Kurtz states, sorry, you're in here a lot. I did not want to take the cultivator out completely. If we do it tonight, I'm sorry, I did want to take the cultivator out completely. If we do it tonight, approve the moratorium, I'd like to see the cultivating part taken out. At 2:03, Chairman Kurtz states, I was more concerned about sale. I thought this was more the sale of marijuana, the cannabis of whatever you want to call it. And that's what I thought we were putting in regulations in to sort of protect us the way we would want Cheshire to be protected. To me, the growing of it has its own regulations now. He's not selling it. I take exception to the fact that we're causing problems to a Cheshire business that wants to move forward into the future. No one spoke up at this point to exclude cultivators as well, and that is why I'm standing here before you today seeking a text change amendment instead of a special permit application. The motion to exclude microcultivator from the moratorium then passed 4-3 with 2 abstentions. On 4/25/22, a public hearing was held to add microcultivation to the permitted uses in the town of Cheshire. No one from the town offered any testimony. This was a zone text amendment adding a definition to microcultivator and pursuant to the state statute. It included that any microcultivator have an odor control plan, be specially permitted in the industrial zones, and have a separation distance from residential use structures. Staff stated that the amendment met the goals and objectives of the 2016 Plan of Conservation and Development. Vice President Natali commented, met 3 or 4 times on this, and we've gone back and forth, inside and out, looked at it many different ways. Looked at the zones, looked at the distance from residential, and I think for me it's something workable, so I'll be voting on it, be voting for it. Commissioner Kadera said, I think this is a good case of perfect being the enemy of the good, and I think this is a good program, and I'll be voting for it as well. A good and perfect program. Commissioner Bowman stated, I voted for it. The location of it fits for the town of Cheshire. The motion passed 8-1. On May 8th, 2023, a public hearing was held for the commission to hear feedback from the town on the prohibition of cannabis uses in Cheshire. The statements from the public at that hearing have already been made part of the record in this proceeding. As noted at prior hearings on this application, none of the speakers was against cultivation, only the sale of cannabis. In fact, the one speaker who raised cultivation was in favor of it. Doug Noble, the 9th person to testify, stated that he was in favor of cultivation. There were 8 more citizens who testified after Mr. Noble, and no one contradicted his statement by saying they were against cultivation. Vice Chairman Natali says, at that point, I was a little disappointed. Again, 17 people out of 30,000 come and express on something that is this important. On 5/22/23, a P&Z meeting discussed cannabis and the various options of handling prohibitions. This meeting occurred 2 weeks after the commission heard the testimony of the public. Commissioner Selmont states, and just to reiterate, the other permits that would be allowed would be microcultivator, cultivator, packager, delivery. Is that it? Am I missing anything? Staff states food and beverage, manufacturer, label makers. Yeah, it's ridiculous. There are 11 licenses. Commissioner Selmont states, and those are all commercial industrial. Retail is the only thing that is retail. I echo the sentiments of Jeff. I could see option 3 being the best balance between what we've talked about, what the public hearing netted, and everything else. I'm leaning towards option 3 right now. Commissioner Downs states, I also feel the same way. I'd like 3 and 4. I'd be leaning towards 4. Prior to the public hearing, I probably wouldn't have said that, but after sitting through the public hearing, people feel pretty strongly, so 3 or 4 would work for me. On 6/12, a P&Z meeting was held to vote on cannabis options for the town. Vice Chairman Natali stated, we had 100% opposition at the public hearings. And I would point out that it was 100% opposition to retail sales. Thank you for your time to listen to comments that were made over the last nearly 4 years. I have not included comments from our current hearings with one exception, as we are still in discussions at this point. In summary then, based on the record, I have one primary issue I want to get across tonight. The public hearing that took place May 8th, 23, where 17 people testified out of a town of 30,000, was exclusively about cannabis sales, and cultivation was only mentioned once, and that was in a positive way. Finally, I have to address the comments former Commissioner Brucato made at the 2-hour mark of our last meeting on 10/15/25. While I greatly appreciate the statement that Commissioner Affey made, I feel I need to address this directly. as the comments are beyond the pale and constitute slander. Specifically, former Commissioner Brucato, at that point an elected official of the town, states, also, I work across the street. Twice now from his facility, I've almost been run off the road. Isn't it his type of business that brings these people in out of town that behave like this? I don't know. Former Commissioner Brucato then states, there's also been hearsay that smokable weed, whether it's cannabis or not, or just high levels of THC has come out of there. This is a type of business coming into this town, a drug business. They're growing marijuana. His final statement, as you well know, some of you, is if the place burned down today, I'd be happy. These comments are absolutely false, and it is disappointing that a sitting member of a commission would make such comments. Again, I thank Commissioner Affey for his proper rebuke of these incorrect and defamatory statements. Thank you. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer, but I can turn it back over to Mr. Hoyler.
Thank you for the history lesson, but as far as my comments and all that, I am for the cultivation. I was always against your loosey-goosey form of greenhouse. So, and I see what you did here, which keeps my mouth shut during this, but when we go to a special permit, it will not be a loosey. If it gets to a special permit, it would, you know, obviously the greenhouse comments come right back because it just, that's, again, you didn't say, I didn't disagree with anything you said about me, that all those comments were correct. That's all.
Thank you.
I saw Mr. Affey first and then Mr. McKinney.
Mr. Smith, thank you for those comments, and I hope that never happens again, what happened. Thank you.
Mr. McKinney.
I was very impressed that all of your neighbors wrote this letter of support, but then I read all the letters, and they were all exactly the same letter except for the signature that kind of diluted the effect.
Understood. They
You
are.
hand this to your neighbor and sign it, yeah, as opposed to your neighbor sits down and writes a letter totally.
Understood.
And
Absolutely.
again, just for clarity, that's all I'm pointing out. I'm not saying that your neighbors don't support it. I'm just saying it takes a whole lot more to write your own letter than it does to just sign one. But
Understood. I would point out that the people that have signed the letters are the business owners in the industrial district. It takes time out of their money-making day to draft something, whereas they signed it, and we believe that means they support it here. But I absolutely understand your point and appreciate it. I would like to just point out real quickly, I know this isn't really an issue, but we did include it just to be safe. Included in the middle of your packet is the most recent, right before the comments from the May 2023 hearing. I apologize, I should have paginated this. But immediately before the comments from the 2023 hearing is the most recent Department of Agriculture test report for Mr. Smith's facility here in town, proving that it is meeting the criteria of growing what they're supposed to grow in that facility, and they are not illegally growing cannabis. So again, I know that's not really an issue here, but we did feel the need to clarify that here. I just kind of want to circle back to, you know, again, this is a zone text change. This is not a special permit. We're not here about Mr. Smith's facility. We're here about setting the stage for someone to come before you with a special permit application. We've already agreed to change the language in, I believe it is section, hold on, 4 or 5 to 3A to say 5 or more complaints from citizens representing separate households or business establishments within a 3-month period. So again, we're really trying to give you the teeth that you were worried about not having last time. And Mr. Glidden is correct that with respect to the regulations I provided you from the state that relate to DEEP and the Department of Health, those are separate agencies. It's DEEP and the Department of Health. And those are technically civil issues. Although I would point out that from the Department of Health standpoint, that civil penalty can add up quite quickly. a good portion of my work is representing other health districts other than Chesprocott to collect those $250 a day fines. And they can add up very quickly if you are not abiding by the order issued by the Department of Health. So those are other agencies, but I just did want to point out here that there is already that regulatory mechanism. If there are complaints about odor, there's already a way to go to DEEP, file a DEEP complaint, and they will come out and test and issue an order if there's an odor issue. And again, I think it's important to remind the commission here that while this is the text amendment, and we're not here about Mr. Smith's property, he's already growing hemp. And hemp is an agricultural product. It's exempt under a lot of the agricultural exemptions from a number of issues, including odor nuisance. That's not the case with cannabis. So by approving this text change amendment, you put yourselves, the commission, in the place to decide what you want going forward. And if someone comes before you with a slapdash application that is not meeting the odor requirements or the security requirements or the building requirements, structure requirements that are in here, you get to determine whether they're meeting those requirements or not. So again, we feel that this gives you the most control over this going forward, while also permitting the town the opportunity to effectively regulate something that's not currently regulated in a lot of ways. Hemp in this town is agriculture. Cannabis is not. And it very much changes the kind of structure and how strictly the applicant would have to comply with those regulatory requirements. That DCP packet is thick. I've read through the Department of Agriculture regulations. They're not that thick because it's not cannabis. And the state really regulates cannabis significantly. And we think that combined with those state regulations, with the power that this zone text change gives you, it gives this town the authority to regulate this properly, keep out the bad actors, make sure that any facility that is operating in a way that's good for the town, does not create a nuisance, and gives you and your staff the ability to have teeth to be able to say, this isn't working. We're gonna do something about this. And again, I would point out that it would be for special permit. You are absolutely permitted to add conditions to special permits. I am dealing with an appeal right now out of a case in Fairfield County where the special permit had 100+ individual conditions to it. You can absolutely say, we want scrubbers that move X number of thousands of CFM, and that's the only way that's what you have to have in your facility as a condition of approval in a special permit. That's the best way to handle this going forward, so that you have the flexibility to deny what doesn't work, approve what does work, and make sure that it keeps working.
Okay, Mr. Solomon has a question. I just want to remind commission members, this is going to be closed tonight. If you do have any comments, questions, now would be the time to get them out, but Mr. Solomon has something here.
Michael, ballpark, based on the draft, how many properties would be eligible for this without going deep into the map? A half dozen? Dozens?
16 or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's not a lot. We're talking maybe, let's say 10.
It's basically
Without-
the East Johnson Avenue strip.
Yeah,
is-
but then also remember you have a few residentially
60.
used properties. You also have a few, you have a church, which would
Yep.
eliminate things that are right on East Johnson. Really, it's gonna be the back of house of McCausland and Dana Court would qualify if they meet the acreage requirement.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bone.
I would be much more comfortable with this, and I'm sitting here with my eyes closed, looking at CK Greenhouses and Kurt's Farms, because they're two of the largest growers in Cheshire, probably in the area, but their facilities their office facilities, their storage facilities, their shipping facilities are all in buildings, not structures. Therefore, I would be more comfortable with this regulation or zone text change if there were permanent structures as part of this. As far as you making the comment that we, as a commission, have the ability to control ventilation, no. We don't have the expertise. I don't have the expertise in what you're doing. I know what a CFM is, I know how much air movement is, I know what it'll take, I know what the person testified to as to what it'd take to purify this situation, but I don't have the expertise for that, and neither does any of these commissioners. So definitely, if something like this happens, we do need, at least in my opinion, a third party to conclude of what you will present. But again, if there's more permanent structures in offices, shipping facilities, and storage facilities where we can control that odor, I would feel more comfortable with it.
Absolutely understood, Commissioner, and we very much understand that. I would like to point out that from the special permit perspective, you as a commission can condition the type of, sorry, go ahead.
So I don't want to, sorry to interrupt. Remember, this is a text amendment. You have total legislative authority. If at the close of the public hearing, you want to say, we're going to change it more restrictive and say building, permanent building, the commission has that right to make that change to the text.
Okay.
So the only thing I would say on the record is maybe asking the applicant, if we were to change that to say building or permanent building, would they object to it?
We would prefer permanent structure, but as Mr. Glidden pointed out, you do have the authority as the commission to change the language before you.
Can I ask a question?
As long as it's more restrictive.
Yes.
You can't lessen the standards.
Okay.
What about, am I cutting you off? I'm sorry. Did you
You
want to?
usually do, so
I know.
go ahead.
No. I was just trying to
No, go
take
ahead.
what you
No,
said.
no.
Obviously, the greenhouse is for the growing of the plants. Mr. Bowman mentioned the packaging, the storage. I don't know how long you store something like this or whatever. Would you be opposed, or can we even ask for this, is if we put into this that the greenhouse itself, the structure of greenhouse, is just for the growing? I don't know your facility now. I don't know if you have a shipping area. I don't know if you have a building attached to the greenhouse.
So
Would that be something that would, because you don't need a greenhouse to package, store,
from a-
offices, I don't.
From a statutory procedure perspective, and I'll let the applicant ask if they object to this, that would be creating a stronger or tougher regulation, meaning you have the rights to break it down to that level. It would be a matter, I would just ask them on the record, do they agree? But ultimately, it's your decision. So you can separate those activities and go further into detail and say.
Yeah, there's nothing of a greenhouse that helps you package.
Exactly.
It's actually, it would be better to work in a building and probably store in a building too,
Yeah,
from what I know about greenhouses.
We would be comfortable with the enclosed structure to be utilized for the cultivation of cannabis, and other activities such as administrative, office, storage could take place in a building, if that would be,
I know it doesn't help out, but that's,
yeah.
The other thing I'd like to clarify is how many licenses are there in the state of Connecticut for the growing of marijuana?
We included it in the package last time. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's certainly less than 20, I believe. It's like, I want to say less than.
My only point is that if we approve this there's not an, I don't care what you put in for properties, there's not another one going in the town of Cheshire licensed by the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, I think, yes, practically speaking,
Unlikely.
Unlikely.
practically speaking, it is extremely unlikely that you would have two growers in one town, particularly in a town like Cheshire. Maybe if it was a really large, like, by area town that was in the middle of, you're not, I think practically speaking, you're correct. There are so few licenses that we're talking maybe one cultivation license per 30 towns or something like that is where we are right now. So yes, I think practically speaking, both because of the number of cultivation licenses and because of the restrictions on where it can go in the town, there's only maybe 16 or so properties we're talking about. It would require the owner of one of those other 16 properties to go get a cultivation license or work with someone who's getting a cultivation license, as we clarified last time. It would not be Mr. Smith who would get the license. He would be the property owner, and another applicant would come in and get the license and apply to you for the special permit. Mr. Smith would be part of that because he's still the property owner, but it would be another applicant before you theoretically for the same property.
I'm not going to cut you off. You still have the floor, Mr.
You're not gonna
Mullin.
cut me off?
I promise.
And I would also be more comfortable, you've got 1,000 feet from a structure. I would like to make it 1,000 feet from a property line. Seeing is, the structures that you're talking about, greenhouses, can be moved right up to a property line.
True, but then they would still be subject to the 1,000-foot rule. The concern with using property line is if you use the property line, the structure could be quite far from the property line too. You could have a very large property where maybe only a portion of it is used for the cultivation of cannabis. If they were to move the structure to the edge of the property and that violated the 1,000-foot rule between residential structures, they would be in violation of their permit and they wouldn't be able to operate.
Like I said, I would be
Understood.
much more comfortable if it was from a property line.
The other reason we have not done that here, and I just do want to be clear with you as to why we have not done that here, the property to the south of Mr. Smith is a residential area. However, there is a huge gap of space between where Mr. Smith's building ceases and where it would cease under this, if he was to come to you, and where that property line is. So 1,000 feet from the property line, I don't know that any, except for maybe one or two properties off of McCausland, would then be able to meet that requirement because there's both a residential property south of this, which is much more than 1,000 feet from the current structure, as well as another non-conforming residential property that I believe Mr. Glidden pointed out at the first hearing that is on East Johnson Avenue. Again, you would be the ones approving the special permit, which would include the site plan to show exactly how far away those structures would be. And if they tried to move any of the structures to get closer to the property line, they would be in violation of their permit. And you would be able to do something about that. But we very much understand those. We tried to give as much separation as possible while still making it possible to do this at the Diana Court property that Mr. Smith owns. But we very much understand that concern.
And again, we're not talking about one individual property.
That's correct.
As you mentioned.
That's correct.
Okay, any other commission members? Our one member of the public left, so, and you're all set, everything's been concluded. I'm gonna close this public hearing. Thank you. Do we, have any, new business to come in front of this, hearing?
Not tonight. We
Okay.
just said the public hearing for tonight.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Kaderis, second by Mr. Solomon. All those in favor? Aye.